Well, hello again, everyone. Thank you so much. We are just so glad that you're here with us. Ken, Alex, and Jim, we're looking forward to a great conversation about allyship. So let's get right into it. So, this is a critical topic and it's close to each of your hearts. And the thing I like about you is that you haven't just thought of this in the context of your immediate colleagues and your family members. You're thinking also of women who have retired and gone through difficult times in work, and also to our youngest of daughters and nieces and cousins who are still dreaming about what it is that she wants to be when she grows up. So, as a male ally who actively works to counter sexism and gender inequality in the community, at home, at work, how do you practice allyship every day? And I'll start with you, Ken.
Stephanie, well, great question about how do I practice allyship. Something for me, this is very personal. I happen to have a 16-year-old daughter in high school, and I would say I've been practicing allyship since the day she was born. I think that was certainly an aha moment for me. And so for me, it's about what do I do today? What actions that will help my daughter tomorrow? And I've always had that mindset. And so whether it's, kind of leaning into the conversation at work at EY and the role that I'm in, whether it's speaking to clients or colleagues, I'm very cognizant of, focusing on the gender aspect, certainly from an equity standpoint, but it's something I live every day, for my mom as well, right? I was born and raised by a single mom and watched the challenges she had at work. So I've been pretty cognizant of this issue, and it's been very personal to me for many, many years.
How about you, Jim?
Yeah, so thanks, Stephanie. I like Ken. I actually have two daughters. And both are in. One's actually in graduate school and one's in university. But I think their entire lives. To Ken's point, I worked on this, and I continue to work on it every day. And I think one of the most important things is inclusion, and making sure that if you're in a situation where you're seeing that, for example, all the men are sitting at the table and the females are sitting in the back row. Why does that happen? Why are we doing that? Why can't everybody sit at the table? Um, Another example is cases where they think maybe they're not as capable as their male counterparts for whatever reason, and helping them believe in themselves. Believe that they are capable, because they're as capable, and oftentimes, as you well know, Stephanie, more capable than their male counterparts. And then finally, I think one of the very important things too is making sure that we are checking our unconscious biases at the door. And it's hard to do. Unconscious biases, as everybody knows, is something that we develop at very young ages, and once you have them, you have them. All you can do is be aware of them, and so you have to make sure, as we're going through these, that whatever it is, whether it's we're talking about promotions or whatever it is, that we're making sure that people are checking their unconscious biases, and we are promoting the most capable individual, not the one that fits our bias of what it should be.
Yeah, excellent, excellent points. How about you, Alex? What's your day to day of allyship?
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie, and great answers by the rest of the panel. When I think about it, I think the first is just acknowledging that we are in this state of inequality. And I think we have to start in that place that this is not the time to quiet down. We must work. And for me, it's really about listening, educating, and then acting as an ally and an advocate for many different communities. I'm an LGBT out at work executive at Bank of America, and I understand the intersectionality, the different dimensions that all of us bring, and how we can all be allies and advocates to one another. But you really do have to start with listening, understanding where people are on their journey. But then we have to be able to educate ourselves and acknowledge that as allies or advocates, we're not always going to have all the answers. We're going to make mistakes, and we're probably going to have to ask for grace in that process of becoming a better ally. And I think when you put all of those together, then you have to get into the act stage, and whether that's creating more opportunities for women, for people of color in the workplace, speaking up when you see microaggressions happening, being able to take on issues as if they were my own. In some cases, even using my privilege to be able to help advance others even more. But it really does come back to just acknowledging that we're on a journey together as allies and advocates, and we have to work together to achieve many of the goals that we hope.
Alex said something that just kind of triggered me. I'm sorry, just the microaggressions, Alex, that you mentioned, and a classic example I see a lot in meetings, certainly whether it's virtual or when we're live. Oftentimes, we'll have one of our female professionals make a comment that at times may get ignored, right? And then a male, professional will come in and make the exact same comment, and that seems to generate some investment or engagement. On a number of occasions, I personally say, wait a minute. I'll say, Stephanie just made that exact point, right? So I think, Alex, to your point on microaggressions and how do you lean in when you can to kind of help people raise their awareness, because they're not even aware, right? The microaggressions happen often, but we've got to point those out. And until we do those consistently, right, you won't see the change. So anyway, sorry, I wanted to just interject.
No, a lot of those microaggressions are actually unconscious, right? So we don't even know they're happening. And I think even the opposite of a microaggression is a micro step, right? What can we take as allies and advocates to help make that change? Just as you said, you gave the opportunity to recognize the voice that had made that original point. That's a micro step, right? So we might not be able to impact this big change all at once, but if all of us as allies and advocates think about it from a micro step perspective, we can make those incremental changes, then hopefully create that culture where those microaggressions are a thing of the past. But we're always going to have to deal with them. It's about how we respond.
Yeah. Hey, and I agree both Ken and Alex. I think those are both excellent points. Ken, you see that all the time, and I think that's an excellent point. And the other thing, Alex, that you pointed out that I think is really important is that willingness to openly talk about, the fact that we are here today, and how we're going to then move forward from where we are today. And I think that willingness to talk about our unconscious biases, that willingness to recognize that we have the situation and empathize, I think is another point that you made, Alex. I think is super important. So really good points, both Ken and Alex. So thank you.
Yeah, just to let you in on a little insight, the concept that Ken described, that microaggression, is called mansplaining, when a man explains what the woman has just said again, even though he's using many times the same words. So, but I think that whole recognizing the humanity and the empathy that's needed in taking those micro steps to stop those microaggressions are definitely something that will catapult us forward. And then even thinking the common denominator that you all said was that someone else's story or a nuance in your own work history, how you were raised by a single mom, family and the like, how those things directed you to your course of allyship. And the other undercurrent was listening. And when you think about that, the development, moving people forward, moving women forward in the listening, that ties very well into mentoring and sponsorship. Understanding what it is that a female colleague would be interested in doing professionally and helping her reach those goals, helping to mentor or sponsor someone and the like. But unfortunately, there was a study done by McKinsey, the Lean-In study, and it was called Women in the Workplace. And it revealed that 60% of male managers said they were actually frightened of being alone with women at work. And in part, you think of these things and you look at some of the movements that have gone on, the Me Too movement and the like, that have driven some of this apprehension. But there was a large speaking out against that, including by Mary Barra, CEO at GM, who said, we can't do this. You mentor her, help her. If we want to propel women in the workforce, we must do this. So, how do you think we should tackle this 60% of male managers having this apprehension? What are things that can be done to encourage a level set of this mentality and have people operate from a place other than from a place of fear?
So one of the things that's really interesting to me is we're doing this right now virtually, right? And if you think about this last year that we've had, the entire last year, at least for us, Stephanie, at General Motors, has been pretty much virtually. We've had maybe an occasion here and there to be in the office, and I know it's hard to build relationships that way. But my own perspective is, if we're nervous about it, Zoom has changed a lot of that, and Teams has changed a lot of that, and Skype has changed a lot of that. And so I think we can do, if that's one of your concerns, we can do this over the phone or in other manners. The other thing that's interesting is I understand how people can feel that way. I personally have never felt that way. I feel that if we have a lot to be concerned about, I suppose, in everything we do. I mean, Stephanie, you're a lawyer, so you would you would understand this probably better than anybody. But there's always those things that we have. I'm concerned that somebody's going to slip and fall on my stairs too when they walk out of my house. But that doesn't mean I don't invite people into my house. And so I just think it's so important that we put what is our goal here ahead of sort of those concerns or those sort of paranoias that we may have. And if you're still concerned about it, we have many open offices in the office where there's glass doors that you can close, so it's private, but then you can have those conversations. And I'm really going to just sort of the on the surface of this thing. I think it's probably much deeper than that, but those are just a few on the surface things. And I'm sure Alex and Ken have even better ideas on how to might deal with that.
Jim, that's where I was going. It really, I think, is a deeper level. You talked about some very actionable, tactical things that can allow for those conversations to happen. But when I saw that stat, and to me, it's a jarring stat, and certainly it doesn't bode well for what happens in the workplace and the progress that we have to make. But I wonder, as men, right, as men, as allies and advocates, what are we really doing to acknowledge that? Is that around complacency or avoidance, right? If I can use that stat, or I can use the fear of something might happening just to avoid it altogether, that's one of the challenges of allyship and advocacy, right? Is that it's too hard, it's uncomfortable, so I don't even want to try. So I'll just use this as a reason to not try or engage or mentor or sponsor. And I think we really have to be able to, as men, as anybody who's an ally or an advocate to any community, how can you really sit with that and be uncomfortable and use that as a growth opportunity? And for men, I think in some cases we have to address our own gender stereotypes, our own version of masculinity. Stephanie, you talked about empathy. Sometimes those are traits that men just naturally, because of culture and society, don't show. And I think when it comes to being able to advocate for somebody else, to put somebody else before you, to be a servant leader to a group of people, you have to set aside some of those stereotypes and examine yourself. So I think I would say where Jim is going, there's absolutely tactics we can do every day in the workplace to make it possible to be better allies and advocates. But I think there's also something where we have to look within and make sure we're examining, educating ourselves, and we're having our own kind of self growth journey as well.
Yeah, great points, Alex and Jim both. I would say for us, one, there's an expectation. If you're a leader at UI or in any organization, there's an expectation that you sponsor and mentor all of your people. Period. Right? I get it, but you have to lean in. Right? We're gonna probably say that term a lot, but you've got to lean into your ability to develop your people, all of your people. And I think this gets back to the environment, right? What kind of environment does your organization have to promote equity across from a mentor and a sponsorship? You've got to focus on it from an EY perspective. That's where we're focused on it. And frankly, we're putting a bunch of goals for all of us from a leadership perspective. We've got a goal in our performance reviews that you better mentor and sponsor folks, period, right? That is an expectation again as a leader, and you got to figure out how to do this, period, right? So I think you said it, Stephanie, your CEO, that was her comment essentially. We just got to do it. And I agree. We've got to do it. Stop looking for excuses, to Alex's point, and let's get after it. I mean, you think about, we probably hire 50-50 every year from universities, female, male, right? We've got to make sure we're doing the right thing by all of our folks because turnover is a heavy cost to that. We've got to make sure we're doing the right thing from an equity standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also with the pandemic, we've seen a greater attrition of women in the workforce as well. There have been a lot of publications about that and how is this really impacting the family dynamic of women who want to remain engaged in the workforce, but they're conflicting time conflicts and the like, and really balancing so much that goes on there. And so, Ken, you led right into my next question, which I love. But you talked a bit about Ernst and Young and having goals for performance and hiring and the like to um, retain and attract women at your organization. And so I'll ask, Alex. So what are your bragging rights? What's going on? What are things that your organization's proud of? What's the bank doing? Let us know.
No, thank you for that. And I think it starts first with equal pay for equal work. If you're at a company today that doesn't have the transparency to the data of what women are being paid, I think that's something to seriously look at. And for all companies out there, the challenge should be out there to be transparent for the work that you're doing around anything gender or ethnic related as well. Be out in front as a leader. So for us at Bank of America, we've actually published for the second year a human capital management report. You can go out and Google Bank of America Human Capital Management Report and see all of our data and statistics that we openly share. And there are many companies that are joining us in that. But in my mind, at this top of the list is pay equity, so important. And then I think we were just talking about the impact on women in the workplace related to COVID. In the pandemic. One of the first things our CEO did was announce in 2020 that there were no reductions in staff. Everyone had a job and was secure throughout that entire time, and that still holds true today. So we wanted to make sure that there weren't exits in the workforce related to the pandemic. And then it's about supporting that physical, emotional, and financial wellness in the workplace, whether that's 26 weeks of paternity leave, 16 weeks fully paid for women so that they don't have to exit the workforce. This year, in 2020, the bank spent over $250 million on childcare. We gave everyone that needed it $100 a day for childcare during the pandemic, and it's still going on today to allow women to be able to still focus on their careers and not have to make some of those difficult decisions. But at the end of the day, it's about accountability. I think Ken said it right. You've got to set those goals. We have that. Again, you can look in that report and see the goals that we've set for ourselves. There's still work to do, but we're proud of what we've done. I will say, though, a lot of these activities and the bragging rights for what companies can do, everybody's getting on par with each other and really making sure that, we're addressing a lot of these inequities. But I think we have to make it can't be a check the box activity, right? We really have to be intentional and authentic about this work. And I do maybe even worry for companies that are trying to move so fast just to say that we have a program in place. But are you really, again, kind of going back and listening to the needs of your people, being intentional and authentic as leaders and as allies or advocates, right? We can't just be out there saying the right things. We've got to be doing the right things and really showing the commitment that we have. So proud of what we've done as a company from our intern hires campus. I think Ken mentioned it. We are hiring at representation. We look like the clients and communities we serve. And that's important to us, but we have to keep growing to retain those people and have the programs in place to do that.
Yeah, I think Alex, that authentic part is. Yeah, I was going to say, Stephanie, I think that authentic part that Alex mentions is so important as a company. It cannot be a check the box activity. I think to your point, Alex, and I think you make a great point, as does Ken. um, the you know those steps, those important steps that we need to take, which is putting them on performance, putting DEI goals on performance appraisal, so on and so forth. Those are very important steps because it keeps it out in front of you. But authenticity is what's going to change this. I really do believe that, Alex, and I think it's a great, really good point that you made there.
Yeah, Stephanie, I'd add a couple things. I think from a bragging rights perspective, we have a global platform called Women Fast Forward. So if you go to ey.com, you can certainly engage in the conversation. We're looking at it from our own people, the community, and our clients, right? How do we move women fast forward? And that's the global platform by which we tackle a lot of aspects. The pay equity, Alex, that you've mentioned is really an important one. And here's something that we've been doing for many years. Very simply, when we're looking to bring in experienced hires, all of our experienced hires, certainly from a gender perspective, we don't ask past salary requirements, right? Because we don't care. We have a role we're hiring for in a certain location, and kind of here's our range. So I don't care what you made, wherever you were from, but those are ways you begin to close the gap, I think, from a pay equity standpoint. Those are some of the practices that we're looking at doing. But again, our Women Fast Forward initiative, please check it out. Lots of information available there because this is an important focus for us as it has been at EY for, 25 plus years. So proud of what we're doing there.
And it's similarly, Ken, to your point. I think pay equity. Alex, you mentioned that's so important, and I think the transparency on pay equity is also super important. Goals in performance appraisal is really important. We also have the Women's Ally Network that we get together on regular basis and talk about what we're doing and how we're advocating and what steps we're taking and so all those things I think are super helpful and obviously I think one of the most important things is DEI in leadership. If you look at the leaders that we have in our organization from the top all the way down through, we're demonstrating we're showing people by doing. And I think that's one of the things that I know, Stephanie, I'm proudest of at our company. Stephanie and I happen to be at the same company. But one of the things I'm proudest of is really our demonstration by doing.
Definitely. Yeah, that's one of my favorite initiatives as well, the allyship initiative. And Jim actually was featured on the big screen a couple of years ago. There was an allyship program at GM, and the title was Leaders on Advocating and Advancing Women in the Workforce. And it was a discussion between Jim and a couple of others about what does it take really for allyship and what are we doing within GM? And then also, what are we doing to push the boundaries? For example, we had a wonderful program, we'll have a wonderful program called the Take Two program, where women who've taken more than 2 years off from the workforce were able to actually re-enter General Motors at a reduced schedule for a certain amount of time to sort of say, okay, this fits in my life now, at which point the person would transition into full employment at GM. And, many of the women who I've met who've gone through the program have said it isn't just that the program existed, it's that the program targeted the key areas, supply chain, engineering, purchasing, and the like, where women can contribute a great deal. And if you look at your customer base, this is where you really want to have strong representation of women as well. So I think that, the thing that I like to think through as well as far as companies is how can we all learn from each other and the different creative solutions that each of you've managed and really share those going forward with others as well. But let's get to my next question and let's think about how do we help? Let's help some other folks. Let's help some of the guys out. Let's help the men. Let's move them forward. What do you think men would benefit from the most a thing they could do on their own that would help them become a better ally?
Look, I think, for men who may be listening to this and wanting to be better allies, and I'll add a point, and I know we haven't specifically used this term, but intersectional advocacy, right? There are so many different groups, and we don't talk just about women. We don't just talk about women of color. These could be women who identify as LGBT. These could be women who are veterans. We all have multiple dimensions to our diversity and our backgrounds and our experiences and our education and our opportunities. So I do think, to be a better ally and advocate, it's understanding the intersectional approach to an individual. We don't just want to address the needs of women. We want to be very specific about addressing the needs of all of those dimensions of intersectionality. But I think for men out there, it's how do you be brave and be bold in the actions you can take? We talked about being intentional and authentic, but I also think you have to be bold and brave, and you have to reach a point in your career and I think in your own personal journey where you realize that advocating for others, being that servant leader to others, is actually what will make your own career and your own legacy enhanced even more, right? Ken mentioned leaning into it. Jim talked about the programs that happen at GM. To me, it's really about on that individual basis, what am I doing to make sure that I'm creating that next layer of success? But then challenge yourself. Look at your own network, right? If women make up 50% of the world, is your personal network as a man 50% female? What can you do to expand that network? What can you do to eliminate biases? As men, we have our own biases. If you're a hiring manager, if you're looking at promotion opportunities, check those biases. Think about those unconscious steps that may be happening and educate yourself on those so that you can really help prepare and advance women in the workplace. And realize again that you can be that change maker. I think that was probably the greatest point of my own advocacy journey, is just knowing that the other groups of people, the people I can put before me, is really what invests in them. And ultimately that becomes a reflection on you. My own career has grown and I've been given new opportunities because others have seen the commitment I've made to groups that are underrepresented, that need more of that focus. And I think the programming we've put together, the program that I've been able to be a part of as an ally and advocate and being a champion for that and being visible in that, not just saying I'm it, but actually doing it and being an ally and advocate is what's made a difference.
Alex, great points. I think I'd add just a couple items. I'll give you a quick example. Some years ago, and I think, Alex, so much of what you said about awareness, right? And I always ask people, why do you care about diversity? Like, just a general comment. I'll meet with clients all the time and they cover their strategy, and I'll ask the leaders or the leader in that meeting, why does diversity matter to you? So really defining your why, like having a real, just pause and reflect on that. But also before you make decisions. And some years ago, this happened to me. We had, I'm a huge New York Knicks fan. And so certainly pre-pandemic, we have tickets to the games and I'd often get tickets. And what I caught myself some years ago was I'd always ask my male senior manager on the account, hey, let's go to the game. And I just had this epiphany. Why wouldn't I ask one of my female senior managers to go to the game? And I did it. And she said yes. And you know what else? She taught me so much. She says, Ken, I was wondering when you were going to ask me, right? Those D&I aha moments matter, and how you grow and learn and develop from that matters. And I share that story because, Stephan, you mentioned, how do we help one another? Well, we've got to share the good and the bad and the lessons learned along the way, right? And so it's about awareness for me. And I think that's how we can help one another, frankly.
Excellent. And I know she appreciated that. Do you remember, did the Knicks win the game?
No, of course we lost. Oh, I hate to say that.
Jim, any follow on?
Yeah, so I think both Ken and Alex, both of you made some excellent points. Ken, I think your points around inclusion. I'm sorry, courage or having the the you know the interest or the willingness to put yourself out there and advocate, I think, is important, and it's actually not that hard to do. So I think that that's a really important one. I think we all talked about mentorship, and I also talked about the fact that if there's a male that wants to get into this, very simple steps that they could take, just like being aware of when, and I forget what you called it, Stephanie, man,
Mansplaining. Mansplaining.
man, just being aware of simple things like that. And it seems simple, but it's important. I always joke, well, did Stephanie move her hands differently? She made the exact same point you just made, so why are you making the point again? And so I think just simple steps like that I think are important. And I of course always encourage people, but also I think what's also important is a male ally, we have to be sure, they have to be sure that they really are wanting to do this. Because one of the things we talked about in our own company is some of our male allies wanted a playbook. And I think that's goes back to the authentic part that you talked about, Alex, is is it takes a mental commitment for for you to put yourself out there and be that servant leader. And I think you need to have the right servant leaders, the right mavens, the right people who are going to change the culture. And that's so important. And I think as a male ally, you have to believe that this is something that you want to do. And the reason sometimes they don't do it is because they don't check their unconscious biases at the door, to be very frank. And I think it's so important that when somebody does want to do it, and I think you said this, Alex, they, we need to make sure they want to do it for the right reasons. That the right reasons are to move females further into the organization and further ahead than they have been in the past. So I think both of you, thank you so much for the great answers. I think it's awesome.
Jim, you actually spurred a thought, and Stephanie, maybe this is something, thinking about the audience that's with us today. As allies, right? Whether allies have to be welcomed, and sometimes we put that burden on. Well, you need to be an ally, but at the same time, the people who are receiving that ally and advocacy have to welcome allies. And sometimes we let our own biases determine if someone's an ally to us, right? How many times have we looked at somebody, no, that person isn't going to like me. They're not going to support me. And I've done it as an LGBT individual. When I have to decide if I'm going to come out in a room, I scan around the table or around the video conference, like, ooh, I don't know if those people would support me. He looks like someone who might not support me. My guess is women may do the same thing, right? And men, look, there are some of the reasons why we have challenges and obstacles to being allies is because we're afraid to make mistakes, right? We may not use the right terminology, or we might say something wrong and get ourselves in trouble, and then it's just not worth doing it. But instead, one, men absolutely need to be allies and advocates, but I also think we have to welcome our allies, give them permission and grace if they make a mistake, give them feedback. Men, a sign of feedback means that you're connecting with someone and they actually want to help further the journey of allyship. So it is a little bit of a two-way street. We need men to be advocates and allies, but to this audience that's listening today, know that sometimes you might have to welcome and embrace those allies to give them the confidence to continue on their own journey.
So those are excellent points, Alex. Really good points. I was just recently, the term they, right? The pronoun they that many people want to be referred to as today. And I was talking to my daughter about it, to your point, Alex, and Ken. And I was saying, well, here's how I would approach that, because it's something that's sort of new to me, being further along in my career, like 36 years into my career. And so it's something that's new to me. And I said, well, here's how I'm going to approach it. My daughter's like, no, Dad, you cannot approach it that way. But it was for me personally, to have somebody that can help me kind of get through and think about it, as long as you're open to it, Alex, to your point, as long as you're open to it, on how your unconscious biases are forming how you approach something or how you go about something. And it's so important that somebody that you have open enough relationships with people that they can point them out to you and help you get through those. And same thing happened. One other story, I was at a I told you I was responsible for motorsports, and I'm responsible. It was a dinner with some very high level people at NASCAR, and I sized up this one individual and thought there is no way we have anything in common. And sure enough, that one individual sits next to me at dinner, and and as it ends up, I was totally wrong with my bias towards that individual. After I sat with this person, because I just looked at how he was dressed, how he looked, and I thought he is, especially when it came to women allyship, or totally opposite of what I ever would have imagined. And so that's another really great example. I was really excited after the dinner, to be really honest with you.
You almost say you have to create a brave space before a safe space, right? We always talk about, I need this safe space to be an ally or an advocate. But the reality is we have to be brave, just like you were brave sitting down next to someone that maybe you didn't think was an ally to you, or talking to your daughter about terminology that you didn't feel comfortable with. As an ally, you have to be brave and to ask those questions and be willing to make mistakes and understand that you're going to learn and grow from it. Be brave that you have to educate yourself more and you're constantly learning. But that brave space will create that safe space to really foster allyship and advocacy.
Yeah, it's interesting, Alex and Jim. I love those points, but the space issue now is so challenging at times because people are very quick to judge, right? People are very quick to let you know when you've done something wrong, or right. So I think having the right environment to allow yourself for the space. Jim, I love the fact that you've gone to your daughter. I think having like I'll call it a personal board of directors, folks that you can go to say, before I make this stupid comment, does this make sense? Right. So I think really having the persons that you can go to say, does this make sense? What would you suggest? Like I do that all the time, and I'm glad I do. So I love that, Jim. That was great. Stephanie, back to you.
Of course, of course. Yeah, I think, to follow along with what each of you said, oftentimes our brains like to just make the easy decision, the split second decision of, I don't like his jacket, I want to sit somewhere else. Or I don't think I understand this person, so I'm going to talk to the people that I would traditionally talk to, or folks I feel more comfortable around. But if you look at any of our organizations, sitting still did not move us ahead. It was actually doing those things that differentiated us in a business context that have helped us advance. And if you try to apply that same logic to those same type of split second decisions, and you're intentional about it, to Jim's point, you can address those unconscious biases. But it does take work. It takes you honoring what has made you you, or the experiences that have defined you, and then saying, okay, where do I need to adjust to the left or to the right to be more inclusive to others? And Alex, your point about welcoming others. I actually invited one of my colleagues to attend. We have, they're called pillars for our GM women's organization, and they all have different particular functions. And so there was a professional and personal development pillar. And I said, you should come to this meeting because I think you would enjoy, a couple of the topics that were talked about. And he said, I didn't think I could attend. And I think that in some points, and for some people, they think that an employee resource group is only for members of that group. And oftentimes, if the resource group reaches out to other groups, or they have cross group activities and the like, I think that level of allyship for all the intersections really deepens, and it's profound. But to your point, Alex, I think he might have been only the third person I'd invited to participate in something, and it was only after I'd been made aware that um, you have to similarly encourage people to participate too. And I think that I mentioned Jim on the corporate wide video a couple of years ago, but I think people watching Jim involved and having an active role in the dialogue and actually being authentic about it inspired others to ask, should I go too, or to invite someone else, or may I go too? But I want to just touch on the unconscious bias point just one level deeper. So, our organizations have all had some type of training, or we send out awareness messages. Our people leaders are aware of how to look for things and the like. But what is the key to consistency in addressing unconscious bias? Because it's very easy to be lazy. It's very easy to be lazy, but you want to advance things and use that extra mental horsepower to help women and other groups in the workplace. So, how do we further unconscious bias awareness and action to alleviate it?
I think for me, it's really back to the day-to-day actions of your organization, right? So for us, we have engagement teams that serve clients. So yes, we have a ton of training available and we execute that, but it really happens on the day-to-day, right? What's your project team like? And how are you reinforcing or frankly calling out when there's some bias or opportunities to learn and grow? And I think you have to set the right tone as a leader, right? We're not all perfect, of course, but setting the right tone, reinforcing some of those messages, because I think a lot about this thing called bias. I've had it unconsciously done to me, and I'm very cognizant of it, and I want to set the right tone, and I want to help my teams learn and grow and develop. But it happens like on a day-to-day basis. It happens on these Zoom calls now, right? Who's not getting called on a Zoom call? Who's the person that continues to interrupt all the time? Like I'll try to do things to call people out. Well, I'll do it depending on who you are. I'll do it in a way that you get the message, but I'll just do something very simple like on a Zoom call. I'll say, "Hey, I have not heard from everyone on the team. I'd love to get some more feedback," and I'll pause, right? Or there'll be a time when I have an individual who just speaks a ton, and I'll say, "Hey, look, great points. I want to get others involved in the conversation." So you have to be, as a leader, very conscious and reinforce it like almost every day, right? Opportunities will arise and you've got to be thoughtful about it and you need to address it. That's how I think you make it work consistently.
So one of the things, Ken, I was going to say, I 100% agree. I think the other thing that's really important as leaders, and Alex has talked about this a few times already, is our need we need to be willing to talk about our own unconscious biases openly. Because as we talk about our own and our own situations where we have recognized our own unconscious biases, it opens it up for others to talk about theirs. And, I've had a couple of very difficult things where I have presented to large groups, and a short time afterwards, I get an email about something that I said that offended somebody. And you have two ways of dealing with that. They're too sensitive. You caught me off guard. You can make your own internal excuses for that, or you can take a step back from it and say, you know what, maybe they have something here. Not maybe, likely they have something here, and and ask if they're willing to talk to you, and spend time with them, and address the issue. And as Alex talked a lot about courage, it's painful. Trust me, it's painful to have some of those conversations because it might be a bias that I thought I never had, and then when I actually look at it, I realize I did, and I need to be aware of it. And And so our willingness as leaders to talk about those, I think, Ken, which is something you said as well, is so important, because then it enables others to do it too. Because then it opens the door, in my opinion.
Really great points, both Ken and Jim. Ken, I think you're right. It's about creating that culture, right, where you do address issues when they happen. You do create that accountability. And then, Jim, where you're going, as I mentioned before, getting feedback is actually a positive sign. Someone sending you an email afterwards shows you that they want to engage, right? And they want to actually help further your journey as an ally to them. And you have to look at it that way. It's a positive sign to get that feedback. I would turn around though, how you feel when you get that email. Think about how it felt or the risk that that person took to tell you, right? As a senior leader in the company, they actually put themselves out on the line to help further your journey. And how we respond as allies and advocates, I think, is so critical. And to me, that takes it all down to the most simplest form. We've got all these great terminology of unconscious bias. I actually turn it around and say, how can I be consciously unbiased, right? Not just did something happen and I didn't know it, but what can I do to be proactive and actually be consciously unbiased? But then I take it down to the most human terms. Every single person on this panel, in this audience today, knows what it feels like to be excluded. And that doesn't feel good at all. We've all felt excluded. There isn't a single person in the world who hasn't felt excluded from something at some point in their lives. And we know what that feels like. But we also know what it feels like to be included. And if that's our job as an ally or an advocate, is to make people feel included, it's that simple.
Yeah. Excellent points, Alex. Really good points.
Yeah, excellent point. And I think that using that, thinking through what it is that we can do to include others and remembering how great and how empowering it is to be included, I think is something that cascaded through the entire discussion today. And for our friends in the audience and for our colleagues who might watch this at another point, I think that really is the driving message to take with us. Think about that inclusion. Also think about the intersectionality and challenge your respective organizations to continually implement things and drive new initiatives as well that will help women in the workplace and also allyship for women in the workplace. So I want to thank each of you for your time this afternoon. It's been greatly appreciated. And I look forward to the folks in the audience as well to challenging your home organizations to do more and be more and to open these lines of communications. So thank you very much.